Right guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. It's chaos behind the scenes going into 2026. Reports emerging that every single car as it stands is substantially over the minimum weight limit going into next year. That'll be a major point they will try and resolve in the coming months. Aston Martin apparently substantially lagging behind in this domain, but Ferrari have come up with a trick in their engine again, which could well compensate for the potential deficit to Mercedes that we have discussed in recent days. If that is, they can keep this power unit reliable. Very much into your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. As always, plenty to get into around about this time, especially this year because testing is less than a month from today. It gets underway on the 26th or whatever it is of January. Couple of quick updates. Now, you guys remember Imola this year. Behrman had a lap. It was good enough for Q2, Q3, whatever it was. It got deleted because there was a red flag before he crossed the line. That delayed qualifying a long way because Haas were arguing, well, he actually didn't see the red flag before he crossed the line or whatever. Now, I think it was pretty obvious that lap was going to get deleted, but the rules at the time were a little bit less clear. They've now tried, anyway, to make the rules more clear, to say if there was a red flag that flies in any position around the track before the driver gets to the line, that lap is no longer valid. So that is the FIA's attempt to get rid of that kind of delay that we saw last year. There's a few things the FIA are currently doing to get rid of those delays, such as increasing the fee for protesting a steward's decision from 20 or from 2,000 euros up to 20,000 euros. A lot of nice steak dinners, I'm sure, for the FIA management team next season. The other big update is the following. So, driver of the year. We talked yesterday what the team principals came up with. There was no Laura McKees, no Fred Vasseur in that one, but I'm pretty sure that all the drivers, or certainly the vast majority, voted in this. They put together their rankings of their top 10 drivers of the year. This is what they came up with. I prefer this one to what the team principals said, but intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. So, they've got Max first. No-brainer, I think, on that one. Norris also second, so he was second in the team principals ranking as well. Third, the team principals had Piastri. The drivers have Russell in third. Piastri fourth. Leclerc fifth. As I said yesterday, I can't see how you can put Leclerc, maybe you can argue it, but like to me, Leclerc has to be fifth at the very worst. So I was surprised to see the team principals have him, personally speaking anyway, down in seventh. He's fifth according to the drivers. Then Sainz in sixth, Alonso in seventh. He was fifth according to the team principals, which I thought was a little bit aggressive. Albon is also here. He was not on the list from the team principals perspective. Again, recency bias is a factor. As I said yesterday, maybe understandably so as the season goes on. You weight those races more thoroughly, let's say. But Albon had a great start to the season. Sainz had a great end to the year. But overall, they scored a pretty similar amount of points. So you could argue it one way or the other. I think that Sainz was better than Albon over the course of the season, but, you know, if you're going to put Sainz sixth, maybe Albon deserves to be at least in the conversation. That's where he is here. So no Hülkenberg on this list that the team principals had, but they do have Behrman and Hadjar. So both of the team principals and the drivers both had these two rookies in the top 10 and no others, which is interesting again to see the drivers put Behrman above Hadjar. I think this is actually very interesting because I'm guessing if you poll the community on Rookie of the Year, the majority of fans would probably say Hadjar. I think even including myself, as big of a Behrman fan as I am. But both the drivers and the team principals have chosen Behrman as the highest ranked rookie of the year, which if you just consider the last half of the season, then like, sure, I guess. But when you consider the whole thing, I think that I'd probably give it to Hadjar, but I can see the argument there because also Behrman quite comfortably really beat Esteban Ocon, who I don't rate Ocon massively highly, but I think he's still pretty damn good, right? I mean, Ocon and Gasly, there was a big debate in recent years who was better, right? They, I think, were pretty similar in most people's respect. And Gasly should also not be too far away from this top 10 driver conversation. So for Behrman to handle business against Ocon as he did was very impressive. So I can definitely see the logic here in having Behrman as Rookie of the Year. Just thought it was interesting that both the team principals and the drivers agreed. So these were the overall, the top 10 according to the drivers, the top 10 according to the team bosses. Not massively dissimilar, but some notable differences here. The conclusion is that Max Verstappen was the driver of the year again. I don't think anyone is really going to deny that as it stands. These are actually the ratings over the last, well, they've only done the driver rating since 2018, and since 2018 it was Hamilton, Max. So, it's Max again this year, the first time actually that the drivers have not voted for the champion as their driver of the season, but Norris still here in second. Last year the drivers had Norris also second, Leclerc in third. The team principals actually were exactly the same last year as, well, what the drivers thought in terms of the top three. This year, some differences, but so actually it was, 16 of the drivers voted, so not all the drivers, but again, a pretty decent number that gave their rating. So intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. F1 Guy Dan also put this together. This is what the drivers have rated over all the years that they've been doing it now, so I'm not going to go through everything in forensic detail, but feel free to analyze if you wish in your own time. The other quick couple of updates that I wanted to get through, this being one of them. Zach Brown says, next year at McLaren, it's the same story. Papaya rules aren't going anywhere. We're doubling down. We're going to give our drivers equal opportunity. So, again, say what you will about whether that was really the case at McLaren this season, whether Zach Brown did really want Lando Norris to win, or whatever you want to say. But McLaren, I guess from their perspective, are saying, well, it worked, didn't it? We walk away from the season despite all the papaya rules drama and the implications of that on our drivers. They won the constructors very handily. They won the drivers in the end, right? So no big deal. But of course, if you really consider how the season went, it was a pretty big deal, the drama between their two drivers. Not necessarily as people, they seem to get on with one another relatively well, but certainly in terms of the way that they handle things, massively controversial. So that, I think, is the question, right? Because McLaren, over the course of the season, on average, had a substantially better car than anybody else did. So they got away with it, effectively. Do we expect McLaren to have that substantially a better car than anyone else next season? It's pretty unlikely, to be honest. Not to say McLaren couldn't still win next year's championship. The Mercedes engine is rumoured to be the best, but will they be that much better than everybody else? I think it's relatively doubtful, given there's also, let's say, Mercedes, who also have a Mercedes-powered car. Their integration is likely to be potentially stronger with the engine and the chassis and all that, and even if it isn't, I would be surprised if Mercedes are a million miles away from McLaren again, as they have been over the last couple of years. So, look, the papaya rules drama is not going away, let's just say that. The other update, again, I don't know how true this is, but we know that Horner has been linked primarily to Alpine in recent weeks if he wants to make a return, which of course he does. He also wants to have ownership. That is very self-evident. Aston Martin could maybe make that happen. But if I'm Lawrence Stroll, I'm a little concerned that if I bring in Horner with equity, Max Verstappen might not be so keen. Alpine is an option, and reportedly Horner is going to buy a stake in the team and become their team principal. Again, this is not necessarily going to happen, but it's something to think about. He wants to buy 600 or 763 million euros worth of stock. Now, I don't imagine he's doing that all on his own back, right? There's talk about a consortium that Horner would be coming in with, but also a very interesting thing to keep an eye on. But let's talk 2026, because again, big drama, 28 days as of yesterday to make it 27 days until pre-season testing begins. Again, that's behind closed doors in Barcelona, but I'm sure we'll be hearing a fair bit about what's been going on. Now, who's going to have the best engine? That is currently all the talk in the last few days. Ford say we might be a little behind in combustion, but we're going to make it up with everything else, the hybrid, all of that. Ford are pretty confident. Red Bull powertrains, that's all part of the same deal, especially because there was this quote that came out. Red Bull is an optimist about its 2026 engine. The recent arrival from Mercedes and 150 Honda technicians has changed the pessimistic feelings. They are suffering a small delay with the combustion side. They expect to be in good position. So that's what we think is going on. Of course, reliability will be a crucial factor. What was interesting is Carlos Sainz Sr. actually liked this tweet. So make of that what you will, because of course, Sainz, well, his son, Carlos Sainz Jr., is a Williams driver now. Used to be at Red Bull, of course, quite a while ago, but he's now driving for Williams with a Mercedes power unit. So what did he mean by liking this tweet about Red Bull looking pretty good? Who knows? Now, Mercedes have been the talk of the town because they are apparently using this compression trick. We don't really know how it works or even if they're doing it, to be honest. James Vowles of Williams yesterday said, well, he said it a couple of days ago, but we talked about it in yesterday's video, that this is kind of all smoke and mirrors from other teams to try and have Mercedes under greater scrutiny than they deserve. But again, he's a Mercedes customer, so take it as you will. Now, this trick is reportedly worth about a quarter of a second a lap. We're talking roughly 13 horsepower. Maybe on some circuits like Spa, we could be talking 4/10 a lap in power. Now, that is comparing Mercedes as if they have exactly the same engine as everybody else, but they're also using this compression ratio trick. But of course, they will not have the same engine as everybody else. Ferrari will have a very different approach, and also a very different approach when it comes to packaging and the use of different materials as well. So a big article comes out here today from Motorsport Italia. Also, this is probably the first article I've seen out of the Italian press so far. I'll just scroll up here because really the interesting things are starting about here. Because the Ferrari press have not been on an all-out attack as they normally are. When Ferrari have a down season, the optimism is semi-reduced. But for a brand new set of technical regulations, there's always going to be a bit of optimism in the air at Maranello. So this is coming out of Motorsport Italia. They say the following: the guys in charge, the aerodynamicists, have been given the benefit of having a power unit designed to take certain concepts to the extreme to reduce the drag of the car. As we anticipated on motorsport.com, the new Ferrari will have smaller radiating masses, and the electric car's battery has been designed to be lightweight and very compact, which should facilitate the design for more aerodynamically advantageous shapes. I'm assuming that means just smaller radiators in terms of the way that that's designed internally. The other key thing that was mentioned is the following. So Wolf Zimmermann left, he's gone to Audi. There's a bit of drama over the last few months. The task of reviewing this extreme solution that has been developed together with the Austrian AVL to find the basic reliability that seemed to be worrying the Prancing Horse team. Effectively what they're talking about here is a steel alloy cylinder head instead of the aluminium one. That was the news that has been kept under wraps, according to Motorsport Italia. Enrico Gualtieri, who's now calling the shots over there, they have looked to have a cylinder head that's made out of a steel alloy rather than aluminium, which would be standard. Now, steel is heavier than aluminium, bad, but is also much stronger. So, pressures and temperatures in the combustion chamber, apparently in testing, are reaching levels that have never been seen before. Does this not scream a little bit of unprecedented speed, or what that guy say at Ferrari a few years ago? Unprecedented in terms of speed. That was the comment on the 2023 Ferrari. And to be fair, it was in qualifying, but in the race, as we know, not so much. So that's the talk coming out of Ferrari. They're designing their engine in such a way that the packaging will be very precise, such that they can design their aero in a very smart way. But also, they're using a heavier alloy in the cylinder heads that will provide some negative, but also potentially some positive as well, because the engine has to be heavier than last year just because of the changes, the battery and all this stuff. So they think they can probably get away with this. But this is certainly interesting, and I think it also gives you a good understanding of why customer teams should be at a disadvantage going into this new year. You know, McLaren it would also apply to, right? Because Ferrari are designing their engine. They know what they're doing. They know how they're designing it. Like the guys who are designing the engine and the guys who are designing the chassis, they're in the same building. So it's not hard for them to say, okay, we're going to design the radiators in this way. We're going to design the packaging and make it very, let's say, well, concise in terms of its size in this way, so you guys can do this. And then the aero team says, okay, can you design it maybe in this way so we can have this aero idea and concept we have? And then they can work together to make that happen. Whereas if I'm a customer team buying the Ferrari engine or the Mercedes engine or whatever, then, you know, I'm only really learning about those things as they become clear to me rather than during the actual design process. So that's a potential other advantage for Ferrari as a customer team. But also this might be the way to counteract what Mercedes have been cooking, right? Because this steel alloy cylinder heads, in terms of higher combustion loads, like it doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be able to up the compression ratios as Mercedes might be able to do, but could they run the engine harder and for longer? Possibly, if the reliability still holds on. So that's the key question on the Ferrari power unit, really. They might have a solution here. Lightweight battery, smaller radiators, that could, very compact. Let's say they can reduce drag aerodynamically due to that method. Maybe that gains back whatever they might be losing to this Mercedes trick. It's possible, but it's also possible the engine blows up every other week. That is not something that can be ruled out either. Now, the other final bit of drama here is on the weight of these cars, because this account here, Veritas F1, comes out and says, a couple of sources behind the scenes talking from the Spanish media or whatever, he says, maybe there are teams that are dragging their feet, they are all overweight, all of them. Aston still hasn't passed the crash tests, but they will. Of course they will at some point, and there are teams that haven't even mounted the engine in the car yet. This pre-season is enough for a Netflix series, because all the factories have to shut down for this period, this little winter break. When they're open again, wow, they will be all guns blazing for the start of the new season. But this is a very interesting talking point, right? The FIA are saying, and Formula One especially are saying, oh, these new cars, they're lighter, they're shorter, they're going to be better for racing. But it's like, well, they're only lighter if they can actually get to the minimum weight limit, which has been reduced. But that is going to be a challenge, right? Look, teams will get there eventually, but these teams have bigger engines now, bigger in terms of the battery and all that, with the kilowatts going up substantially by almost 3 times over what we have seen so far. So with all that in mind, they're going to be way overweight at the start. This was true in 2022. Basically, every team apart from Alfa Romeo was overweight in 2022. And guess what? Alfa started the season well. Top 5 finishes. Was it Bottas in Miami or whatever? They had some good results that season, early doors, before things fell off again for Sauber, Alfa Romeo as they were combined at the time. But this will be a key talking point again in 2026. And the fact that there's rumours that, right now every single team is struggling on the weight limit side. Now, Aston Martin apparently are also more significantly behind the curve because Enrico Cardile used to be a Ferrari man. He is their chassis guy, really, alongside Newey. And he joined pretty late on this year. So they, as a result, either made some changes or they decided to hold some things back in reserve to such an extent that they've not yet got the crash test done. Other teams have. Again, it's not hugely urgent. I mean, it is kind of urgent, but in the sense that you don't want to send a chassis off which is too robust and too heavy. It's not a bad thing, as Red Bull have proven in recent years, to maybe fail it once and then, buff things up a bit and then go for the second time. But the crash tests are more advanced this year. They're more challenging because the safety is trying to improve from side impacts as well as just front and rear impact. So that's a talking point. So apparently Aston Martin, if anyone is behind the curve right now, it's them. But apparently all the cars are overweight, and this is especially interesting when it comes to Ferrari's engine because, they're trying to be compact, they're trying to be lightweight with the battery, smaller radiators, whatever, the strategy with the bodywork. But they're going to try and run their engine harder by using a, frankly, heavier steel alloy in their cylinder heads. So this is what's interesting, I guess, because the other teams will probably have thought, again, this is why it's a brilliant sport and engineers have different opinions, but I guess the theory is that the other teams will have thought, okay, we need this car to be as light as possible, the weight limit is a massive challenge, let's use the aluminium cylinder heads, that will make sense. But Ferrari maybe think that actually using steel alloy, it will be heavier, but they can potentially gain more performance as a result of that, and maybe they can make up the weight in other areas. So, look, very interesting, very technical at the moment. Intrigued, as ever, to hear your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.